Today's word is Hewsonism. Back in the 1980s, when the band U2 first came out, I remember encountering the Joshua Tree album and thinking that, boy, this was great. This was one of the best albums I had ever heard. I still think that. And I particularly liked the lyrics to a lot of the songs. I thought they were very deep and profound and moving. And I thought, wow, whoever wrote this was a real genius. And then sometime later, I had occasion to see an interview with Bono, who, of course, wrote the lyrics. And I don't think Bono's a chucklehead or anything. He's not stupid. But he wasn't the genius I had taken him for either. And I realized that what was happening was I was projecting onto those lyrics my own thoughts, my own ideas. The profoundness I found in it was my own profundity, or what I thought was profound. My 20-year-old self thought was profound. I might not find it profound today, but the interpretations I put on it were my own. And yet I was attributing them to Bono. And that was a mistake. And that's what Hewsonism is. It's when an author or an artist produces something that the audience can project onto their own beliefs, their own thoughts, their own best ideas, and mistakenly attributes them to the author or the artist. I've named it after Paul David Hewson. That's where the Hewsonism comes from. You might be scratching your head right now trying to remember who Paul David Hewson is from that philosophy class you took. Well, I guarantee you've heard of Paul David Hewson. I know this because I mentioned him a moment ago. It's actually Bono's real name. Turns out that his parents didn't look down at their new bundle of joy and say, let's call him Bono, after that great trip to the zoo they had that day. And then when he was an adolescent, it's like, I keep telling you, Dad, it's Bono. I hate you so much. But Hewsonism is a word that I have named after Bono as an artist. Bono actually is a genius. He's just a different kind of genius than I initially thought. He is a genius of Hewsonism. He's a genius of being able to create a work out of which the audience can draw more than he put in. And when an artist does that, it's a good thing. Much of the time, Hewsonism is going to have a negative connotation, but I wanted to name it after an artist because in art, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's actually good art for the audience to be able to pull out their own impressions and their own ideas. There's always an element of error in Hewsonism, though, in that those ideas and that stimulation of the audience is attributed to the artist, even when it's coming from the audience. But it's not a bad thing for an artist to do. So I've named it Hewsonism after Bono because I want it to be. I don't want it to be entirely negative. Now, another place you find Hewsonism is in philosophy. I can't stand reading philosophy. There's a few philosophers who are okay, but every time I try to read them, I get 3 or 4 pages in and I throw the book across the room. They'll leave terms undefined, or they'll put them in quotations and then proceed as though they had defined them for 300 more pages or 400 more pages. They're sloppily written, and it seems to me like they're written specifically in a way that courts Hewsonism. A philosopher will have some core idea that might be interesting, but it's only this big, and they'll put it in a box that's this big, and fill in the space with the styrofoam packing peanuts of excess verbiage, and then they'll ship it off to the nation's philosophy students to read and engage in Hewsonism. And there's a lot of bright philosophy students out there. They'll read it and they'll project onto it something that they think is meaningful and profound and insightful, and that will be attributed to the philosopher who wrote the thing in the first place. I think a lot of philosophy arises that way. I'm not convinced that many philosophers are as brilliant as they are credited with being, so much as they're brilliant at Hewsonism. So that's my impression. Now, I'm not a philosopher, but I get that strong impression from a lot of them. Another place you find Hewsonism is in politics. It is, of course, a practiced art among politicians and to write speeches that everyone listening thinks that the politician is speaking to them and is on their side and believes in what they believe in, and so forth. Hewsonism it's somewhat dishonest in a politician. It's a way of fooling people, tricking them into voting you because they think you're on their side and that you can that your worldview is similar to theirs and that you can represent them when in fact it's nothing of the kind. So it's kind of dishonest in politicians to engage in Hewsonism, but it gets you elected, and so there's a lot of effort in that direction. It made me think up something called the Hewson Index. You know, the statistical details of how you construct it, we could quibble over. There's probably a multitude of ways to do it, but the way it works is Hewson Index is you poll an audience of a political speech, and you place them on a continuum of some political metric. Left wing, right wing, Democrat, Republican, what have you. You've developed some manifold with a scoring system so you can place people on that number line. And then you poll them also to determine how much they think the politician agrees with them, or at least agreed with them in that speech. And the Hewson Index is the spread. If there's only a very narrow range of people who think the politician's views agree with them, then they're probably right. That's the politician's views, and he has spoken to that group of people who agree with him, and other people correctly realize that the politician doesn't represent their views. If you have a big spread where people at both ends of the political spectrum all think that the politician, at least in that speech, agreed with them and was expressing a worldview and a politics that agrees with them, that would be a large Hewson Index. It might have some interesting application in political science to look at the Hewsonism of political speeches and see how politicians who are better at it, if it helps their career, or if at the end of the day the people end up sensing their disingenuity and turning against them. Anyway, the Hewson Index. Another place you find this phenomenon a lot is in religion, in religious texts. You know, one of the most profound stories in the Bible, environmentally speaking, is the story of Noah, where God commands humankind in Noah to take care of the biota of the earth and preserve and protect and save other life forms of this planet from environmental catastrophe. And if you think that's a very wise thing to take out of the Bible, well, thanks. Because that's not the Bible's wisdom, that's my wisdom. I just projected it onto the Noah story. The fact is, in the Bronze Age, there was nothing like 21st century environmental consciousness. There's no evidence of that anywhere else. So in fact, there's a lot of evidence that it was a very different view of the world. And so if you want to make the claim that that wisdom is in the Bible, you have to not only show that it can be read that way, but that the people who wrote it intended it to be read that way. And good luck with that, because that's just not the case with what I just said about the Noah story. It's an interpretation you can put on it, but that's Hewsonism. It's total Hewsonism. And I'm picking on the Bible, but you get the same thing with the Quran and you know the works of Lao Tzu and the Bhagavad Gita. People are constantly saying that these ancient texts reflect, you know, quantum mechanics or modern cosmology or something. And it's like you can't just show that a text could be read in such and such a way. You have to show that it was intended to be read in such and such a way if you want to say that those things are actually there. Otherwise, it's just Hewsonism. And you get this a lot in religion. I picked on the Bible, but it doesn't have to be the Bible. It's just, this is a common thing that happens in religion. And the last one, which I expect will ruffle some feathers, is Shakespeare. Shakespeare was awesome. I think I've read everything now that Shakespeare has ever wrote. But here's the thing. For 400 years now, editors have been picking over Shakespeare and making changes. And there's a variety of rationalizations for making those changes. Oh, this must have been a typesetter's error. Or this was a copyist's error. These letters look similar in the way they used to write, and it was an easy mistake to make. This looks like, maybe a line was removed or was, offset or something, and that led to an error. But it would be really much better if we changed it this way. And that's surely how Shakespeare must have written it, because Shakespeare was awesome. Well, Shakespeare was awesome, but when you have 400 years of editors correcting things, and all of those editors are on Shakespeare's side, right? It would be pretty amazing if, after all of that time and effort, the works of Shakespeare as they've come down to us had zero Hewsonism in them. That would be peculiar. There's almost certainly some in there. So not all of it, not everything we attribute to Shakespeare comes from Shakespeare. Some of it comes from his editors and his critics over the years who, like I said, are on his side and made changes. And if there was an option when they made the change, this is better than this, well, that better one must be what Shakespeare actually meant or actually said, So there's a little bit of Hewsonism in a process like that too, or one would expect there to be. It's really hard to demonstrate that, but you might expect there to be something like that. So that's today's word. Today's word is Hewsonism, and again, what it means is a work of art or a text that can be read or heard by the audience in such a way that the audience projects its expectations, its best thoughts, its most profound ideas onto the text, but attributes it to the author of the text and doesn't realize that it's coming from themselves. That's Hewsonism. And that is today's word. These videos and the words I propose, I'm hoping are not just me spouting off, but that they're stimulating enough to the people who watch them that you can expand upon them and make your own contributions to them, or make your arguments against them and why they should be constructed differently. I'm hoping for a real conversation in the comment section. So please, by all means, contribute in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoy the process, then please like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next video.